I smoked a lot of traditional barbecue beef ribs with a beautiful dark crust, a nice smoke ring, and beautiful delicious juicy meat. But now there is a new sheriff in town. Damn. The 72-hour sous vide beef rib. And our boy Joshua Weissman showed us his version of these delicious beef ribs. Now I've got to find out how they stand up to my perfect version of the barbecue beef ribs.
Big thanks to Napoleon Grills for sponsoring this episode.
I got a nice 3-bone piece with plenty of meat. However, there's a little bit of a fat cap on top of this. Now, of course, that's going to render down, but I'm not going to need all of it. So I'm going to trim it down a little bit and make these beef ribs absolutely delicious for sous vide. And I'm saying that specifically because it's different for sous vide than it is for the barbecue. And underneath that fat cap, there's a little bit of silver skin. I'm going to get rid of that as well. Now you can throw this away, or even better, you can put this in a pan, melt it down, and end up with your own homemade beef tallow. Now the beef ribs are nice and trimmed up, looking good. Then the beef ribs go into a vacuum bag, get dropped into a sous vide bath that I set up to a temperature of 140 degrees Fahrenheit, which is around 60 degrees Celsius. I'll let them sit in this bath for 72 hours. Yes, that's 3 days. So I gotta come up with something to do in the meantime, because that's a long time. It's now 16 hours before the Joshua Weissman beef ribs are ready, and I need to get started on mine. And of course I got another set of beautiful beef ribs as well as some delicious seasoning. And the first thing that I'm gonna do is take some of that fat and silver skin off so we have a good comparison. And for the seasoning, I'm gonna keep it simple. I'm gonna stick to the PitmasterX Texas barbecue rub. Now this is based on salt, pepper, garlic, and a little bit of onion powder. I'm gonna season it, just gonna sprinkle some of that on. Of course, I'm gonna hit all sides. And do remember with beef ribs, if you're barbecuing beef ribs, never take off the membrane from that bottom, because that's going to make it fall apart when it's absolutely tender. Now this is ready for the barbecue, so let's fire it up. I'll be cooking on the Napoleon Ketter Pro grill. I'm going to load it up with a little bit of charcoal and then put some coconut briquettes on. That's going to give me a long cooking time. And with a little chunk of smoke wood, my barbecue is now ready to go. I'm aiming for a smoke temperature of 110 degrees Celsius, which is 220 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm going to put the grill grates and the beef ribs in, close the lid, and dial it into temperature. I like to use a method for my beef ribs with our 3 phases, and this is the first one, smoking the beef ribs and getting some color on them. Now it's time for phase 2, but first let's take a look. Whoa, these are some beautiful looking beef ribs. Look at that dark brown color that developed. That is called the bark. Now we've achieved that by smoking. We had a little bit of smoke wood in there, and every time the smoke wood was finished, I'd add a little bit more. So we got a nice mahogany brown red color. As you can see, the outside of the beef ribs became a little bit moist. And to make the bark absolutely perfect, we need to get rid of that moisture. So I'm going to close the lid and I'm going to raise the temperature up by opening up the bottom vent, keeping the top vent completely open and letting it come up to a temperature of 140 degrees Celsius. 2 hours have gone by and whoa, look at that. That is what I'm talking about. I got a beautiful dark crust and I don't want to take it any further because the edges are getting a little bit dark. I got my crunchy crust, so it's time to take it off. Take out a sheet of baking paper, put the beef ribs on, and they currently have a core temperature of 90 degrees Celsius. Now it's still warm and it's going to raise up even further, up to 92 degrees Celsius. So I'm going to give them 10 minutes to lay here uncovered. Then I'm going to wrap them up, put them in an oven tray, seal that off with aluminum foil, and then stick that in the oven at a temperature of 50 degrees Celsius and let it rest there for at least 10 hours. There it is! 72 hours in a sous vide bath. It just looks real different. It is soft to the touch. It looks like the meat became brown. But let's open it up and take a look. Of course, I'm gonna save that gravy, and I'm being real careful here because I don't want it to fall apart on me. The color that it has is brown, even though we didn't grill it, roast it, or smoked it. And I can't wait to cut into this. But first, there's another step. I gotta put this in the fridge, let it cool down so we can treat it properly. So there we go, another 2 hours in the fridge. Of course, I gotta have a reduction sauce. I'm gonna start with some beef tallow. While the beef tail is melting, I'm chopping fine a shallot and some garlic. I'm gonna fry the shallot and garlic until it's nice and soft. And I have about 2 tablespoons of beef fat, so I'm also gonna add 2 tablespoons of flour. And then it's time for the juices of the beef ribs to go back into the gravy. Stir it up, mix it up, and then your sauce should thicken like this. But the gravy is gonna get thicker and thicker, and that means I gotta add more. I've got this beautiful red wine from Abruzzo, Italy, and I'm going to add about half a cup of it. I think we got about half a cup of the beef stew now, and I got half a cup of red wine. This is starting to smell really, really good. Well, absolutely perfect. In the meantime, let's take a look at the barbecue beef ribs. These have been smoking for 4 hours to get smoke flavor on them, 2 hours of roasting them and get a beautiful crispy bark on the outside. And once they hit a core temperature of 90 degrees Celsius, wrap them up, put them in my oven, I'll let them sit there at a temperature of 65 degrees Celsius for 10 hours. 16 hours on my beef ribs. This is the way I like them the best. Oh. Careful now. These beef ribs look insane. Let's take a look on the inside. Look at that, we got smoke ring, we got juiciness, the fat rendered out, nice. Wow, those are some good looking beef ribs. Classic barbecue beef ribs. I know these are good, they turned out absolute perfect. And now it's time to finish the sous vide beef ribs so we can do a reasonable comparison. The beef ribs are now cold and it's time to slice into them. This is the moment of truth. Let's see what they look like. Here we go. They look like bacon. You got a nice pink, you can see the marbling of the fat. That looks freaking delicious, but we're not done yet. We're gonna portion these up, and cooling them down means you're able to cut them a lot easier. You can already see on the top here, this is starting to fall apart, and if I push it, see how tender that is? I'm gonna season them a little bit with some PitmasterX Texas barbecue rub, then give them a sear over the sizzle zone until they have a beautiful crust on the outside. They're almost at biting temperature, but the problem is they're starting to fall apart. That is how soft they are. These beef ribs are gonna be something else. That 72 hours, I can already tell you, there might be some magic there. And now the time has finally come. After 72 hours of being hungry, it's time to eat. Well, I had a little snack in between, but you get the idea. I've been craving these and they look absolutely fantastic. First of all, I want to say we've got the smoked beef ribs here and they look absolutely freaking amazing. Then we have the sous vide beef ribs here and they look great as well. If I would get these served in a restaurant, I would definitely wonder what's up with these beef ribs because they don't have a bark. So the smoked beef ribs are a lot more familiar to the eye. However, I must say both look good. So without further ado, I'm gonna bite into these and see what the differences are. Oh, can we take another little moment to appreciate this? Look at that, juicy beef ribs. Oh man, a good guy would call that a reference steak, but I'll take beef ribs over steak any day of the week. Now we're going to try the 72-hour beef ribs. For me it's a first, so here we go. Oh, insane. The structure is completely gone. It's like a dessert. That's how soft this is. What to say? I never had the texture like that before. You can literally suck it off the bone. Of course, these are not barbecue beef ribs. These are not smoked. So they don't have the crust, they don't have the bark, they don't have the flavor profile. But these are the best non-barbecue beef ribs I've ever had. Of course I'm gonna drizzle on a little bit of that sauce. It doesn't get much better than this. What's next after 72-hour beef ribs? It's crazy, so soft.